Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be here. Fantastic topic. It's a topic we hear about every day. We get a lot of questions about it every day, and I learn new things from customers all the time. And what I'm trying to do here today is put that into a little summary of data protection. Right, I work for Veeam. We've been doing this a long time. We're the number one provider out there. Uh, and make sure people do understand, like you mentioned, Ron, the alignment of cybersecurity and data protection. Sometimes they aren't considered part of the same, and I will argue that up and down that they are incredibly intertwined. So, uh, by the way, I'm going to talk kind of a twofer here. I'm going to talk about cybersecurity, recover from cybersecurity, and a little bit of data freedom and data mobility because those are topics that are coming up all the time. A quick reminder that after cyber attacks, when bad things happen, one of the first things that we do is we go into forensics mode. And there's a reason why I'm bringing this up, because I've had a number of situations where customers have the ability, they're all set to do recovery, but because there was an issue, right, a breach or an attack, the forensics team stopped everything. I totally understand that. They need to get a lay of the land, understand where they've been, but as recovery specialists, as stewards of our systems, as custodians of our systems, we need to make sure that our end users, our business, our customers are up and running. The forensics, right? The cybersecurity tactics and the recovery can be done at the same time. So we're going to cover that a little bit in a few different ways. I'm going to talk about recovery to the cloud, recovery from the cloud, and recovery in the cloud. Now, you can do all on-premise recovery. That's fantastic. We've been doing that for a while, and we can talk about that at length if you like, but I kind of want to focus on the cloud element and intertwine things like entropy analysis and secure restore and threat detection. I'm getting a lot of questions on Yara and threat detection, and we'll come back to that at the very end. So let's cover a little bit about recovery to the cloud. Well, first of all, the Veeam data platform, right? We're not just about backup. We're not just about recovery. We're about secure backup and fast recovery. You don't want to test your recovery time after disaster. You want to know up front that it's going to work, and we'll cover that topic. We do want proactive monitoring and alerts, right? Why would I drive a car without a dashboard? And I want that dashboard to be more than just a check engine light. I want something that tells me a little more specific what I'm working on. And I'm getting a ton of people asking me about orchestration. Our systems are becoming more complex, more detailed, and the last thing you want to do is put together a recovery plan at 2 o'clock in the morning after something bad happens. And there's an example. I had a customer who had a fantastic recovery plan in place. Their incident response plan was set. A Veeam customer, they recovered in the middle of the night. Very unfortunate that they didn't attack, but I'm very pleased that they're able to recover quickly with very little impact. All this needs to tie back against the now updated, right, NIST cybersecurity framework, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Everything we're talking about does track back to that framework. So let's talk about the ever-evolving landscape of cloud computing, right? We talked about on-premise a little bit, but that's kind of revolve this around cloud. And the three fundamental aspects of cloud recovery: to the cloud, from the cloud, and in the cloud. And not everyone has this philosophical idea in place, right? And that's why we're here to help. Where do I go to the cloud? How do I come from the cloud? Let's get into those specifics. Let's start with recovery to the cloud, right? It's my ability to migrate from on-premise to cloud environments. Sometimes they call it data freedom. I call it data mobility. It's my capability of taking workloads I have on-premise, doing migration, doing recovery, whatever I want to do. It does require careful planning, but again, that's what we're here to help with. A little bit of a visual on that. On my upper left, I have my primary storage, right? That's where I read, write all my data. It's blocks, it's files, right? I backed it up to nearline storage, right? High speed, or I should say high ingress. I want to be able to write all that data quickly. It can be any number of different platforms. We support them all. And then I include with that a third copy of my data, or really a second backup copy, if you will, out of my cloud provider. Now I call it AWS here, but it could be any cloud provider. I have buckets, right? Within my Veeam environment, we have hundreds of thousands of Veeam customers. I can restore to EC2. Right? Again, multiple cloud providers, but let's focus on Amazon. I'm going to take workloads I have on premise. I'm going to recover to my cloud provider. And note that I do have the secure restore option. If you look in the lower right, I have a couple of things circled. I'm going to the US East, and I'm going to do a secure restore. We'll come back to that secure restore a little bit because it's key. Um, I can do AV scans. So something bad happened in my environment. I want to do a recovery. I want to use perhaps a different AV provider, right? Maybe I'm using brand X for my production. My recovery uses brand Y. Again, zero-day exploits. I can also leverage the power of Yara without getting all the specifics. And I'll have a couple slides in Yara later. It's threat detection, and it's beyond threat detection. You can even do any kind of data analytics. I had a customer that used Yara to look for social security numbers within their environment. Fantastic use case, right? As a backup provider, we touch all your data. Why not leverage that incredibly powerful footprint? So the pros, right? It can be very cost effective. I'm not building another data center. I have one on standby, so to speak. Very scalable, right? I'm not speccing out a DR center, then it has to change with my production. You got to be careful because your costs can accumulate. So, make sure you're aware of how much space you're consuming, how much resource you're consuming. But it's very strategic, right? Very flexible and very scalable, and a lot of reduction in data loss, right? Recovery from the cloud, very interesting topic. I had this conversation not that long ago, right? I have something bad happens in my data center. I have all my data in my cloud provider. I want to bring it back from my cloud provider on premise. Again, fantastic, use, right? Something, maybe it's a flood or something else. Doesn't have to be a cyber event, but it could be anything along those fronts. Kind of the opposite, very similar picture though. Primary storage, nearline storage. Note the green lines. I'm taking systems or data rather, or backups that I have in my cloud provider and bringing on premise. I can even take EC2, right, compute storage out in AWS, or I can do Azure as well, and bring that on premise. Fantastic for a use case. I do want to talk about some of the concerns here, though. Again, huge flexibility because I'm leveraging all the cloud provider resources. I'm worried far less about buying additional infrastructure. There is potential higher operating costs, and I'll argue there could be time, right? If I'm trying to pull a sizable amount of data back from my cloud provider on premise, you can't avoid latency, right? That is going to be an ongoing issue. There may be times when it's required, but kind of be aware of what your SLAs are and if that recovery is part of that. Benefits, right? Minimal downtime in business operations during an outage. Kind of obvious, but it's good that we restate that. Risk management. Again, I can go to a different data center, so I have a bunch of flexibility on my data center. Let's talk a little bit about recovery in the cloud. So we talked about to the cloud, we're restoring to the cloud. From the cloud, we're employing from the cloud on site. What if my data is already out there, right? What if I've been doing my backups and I have regular, consistent data flowing out to my cloud provider? I can do swift restore of operations by leveraging pre-existing cloud backups, right? So much less data movement than from the cloud or to the cloud because, well, my data is already in the cloud. Here's an example, and I'm going to use the zombie apocalypse, right? Something really bad happened in my data center. Hopefully this never happens to you, right? Fire or something else. But my data is already in my cloud provider. My cloud provider has compute. They have networking. They have, VPCs. There's no reason why I can't take data that's out there, spin up, in our case, a Veeam environment, and take that data from on-premise and bring it, in cloud and put it somewhere else in the cloud. Very cool. This also doesn't require any licensing, right? Because within Veeam, at least, we don't charge for restore, we charge for protection. So you can always have a standby environment ready. Very cool option, one to think about. It does require an investment in cloud-specific backup, right? But Veeam does that. Potential for increased complexity, especially on the networking side. So be very careful on the networking. But again, very possible to work that up, to design that into your architecture, and mitigate risks associated with cloud vendor outages. Right, there's all kinds of things I can do. If something bad happens to my data center, I can just bring it up in the cloud. Keep in mind too that this is not all about on-premise virtual machines or everything else, right? That you have on-premise. As a consumer of cloud compute, someone who has compute out in the cloud, it's important that you protect those instances the same way you do on premise, right? The assets within the cloud are ultimately the user's responsibility. It's part of the shared responsibility model. If you're not familiar with your cloud provider's shared responsibility model, certainly get used to it and get to know it. It's important. But you can easily leverage Veeam, right, for your backup. You can do cloud native backups, on-premise backups, do that cross replication. That conversion is really fun to watch, and I can meet my compliance requirements Should be a part of your strategy. I should protect my virtual machines in the cloud just like I do on premise. Shared responsibility model. If you haven't seen it yet, good idea to become very familiar with it. Here's an example, right, where I have a production environment. I have my EC2, my block stores, and my snapshots, and I'm going to protect those to a different backup account. Note the different credentials. So if there's a credential violation or credential breach, we call this authentication framework. I'm not going to sacrifice both my credentials, right? I have a different set of credentials in different regional environment. And it's also a lot less expensive, right, to protect my workloads out of my cloud provider because I'm not utilizing the more expensive primary stores, the block storage, where I'm using my snapshots. So you can save money on that front as well. This is a rather complicated diagram, but it just very quickly, I just want to show what's in red. I have my ability to take on-premise and go to cloud and cloud to on-premise, and I see customers do this all the time. Latency is important, right? If I have a server that requires on-premise deployment because of latency, maybe I move it on-premise, or I want it to go globally, I could put it on my cloud provider too. So very cool. Don't forget about your SaaS applications, right? In this case, Microsoft 365. I have this conversation probably on an hourly basis, the need to protect my Microsoft 365 environment. And you can do that, Microsoft M365 to on-premise, or you can go to another cloud provider or another region. We have these architectural and design issues or conversations all the time. I will say this, it's never been easier to be an engineer. It's never been harder to be an architect. So keep that in mind. We're happy to help you with that. Make sure you know your retention policies and have the ability to point in time recovery. Data loss. Having been in mid-level IT management, I understand the importance of data loss. Or as my old CIO told me, Randy, an outage is bad, but data loss will get you fired. So important to keep that in mind. And then also having those in line with your legal and compliance teams. I had to get those answers from my compliance team. That's not an IT decision, it's a business decision, but we as IT professionals need to adhere to those requirements. And having the granularity. I don't want to recover an entire mailbox, maybe an individual message or other office item. A lot of architectural decisions, again, on-prem, in cloud. I have customers that have both for reasons that are too deep to get into right now. They have on-premise Exchange, but they want to protect it the same way they're protecting their Microsoft 365. A lot of stuff to do in that front. Keep in mind the Microsoft's policy around 365, and this happens to cover a lot of other SaaS applications as well. It's really about platform availability, not data protection. That's not to say they don't protect your data. They're really focused on getting your keeping your systems up and running, which is what they should be. And that's where players like us come into play. Don't forget about your Salesforce. Like another very popular conversation. Salesforce, again, a sample of a software as a service. Make sure that you are protecting that just like all their digital assets, right? If Salesforce is unavailable, a lot of companies just shut down, right? Make sure you have that ability, especially as you start doing integration with other apps or other development. Make sure you're protecting your Salesforce as well. Same idea, right? Region to region, however you want to do it, cloud to cloud, however you want to, check the boxes on your audits. We can help with that. And then orchestration. I'm going to argue there's not necessarily, stateless is somewhat of a subjective term. Some people have told me that they're stateless and they don't need to back up their environment. I'll challenge that a bit, knowing that the ability to recover an environment, right, is not necessarily rebuild, but it's literally a recover. So, we're seeing more and more data that you may not even be aware is available, or I should say present in your environment. Make sure you're protecting that as well. We use Kasten rather at Veeam, and it's becoming very, very popular. Remember your external dependencies and stateful components. So protect your environment with Kubernetes. Regular backups are essential, and integrating a third-party backup solution to prevent an added layer of security and functionality. Keep in mind, too, there could be cyber attacks that go against your containerized environment. Be aware that you have to recover in those situations as well. Let's talk a little bit more about ransomware. Specific to analyzing your backups and looking at ransomware. Keep in mind, as a backup provider, any backup provider, it's the only real tool in your environment that touches all your data, all your systems. I don't care if I have 20 systems or 1,000 systems. I'm going to protect those. I'm going to back them up. I now have some unique capabilities as a backup provider, being I have access to all that data. One of them would be entropy analysis, right? And it's my ability to look for strange anomalies. I think of one situation where a customer contacted me. He was very concerned because he kept getting potential ransomware alerts. So Veeam was detecting this potential ransomware alert. His question was, should I be concerned? Yes, you should be very concerned. Let's take a look at this. What he was seeing was a change rate of reads, right? Where it looked a lot like encryption. It turns out that's what he was doing. They were doing some encryption in their environment. So we notified him that there's a potential ransomware attack in process, right? We also will look at backup files, right? If backup files get really big really fast, that's an indicator that, well, you have a high change rate. A number of factors can cause that, including your ransomware environment. So we will do suspicious activity detection, and we will do encryption detection. Again, part of your backup solution, tied very tightly with your security platform. If you're a backup admin, talk to your security people. If you're a security person, talk to your backup people, and we're happy to help with those conversations as well. One very important thing, I'm looking at like 3 more slides. I really want to spend some time on Yara. First of all, what is it? It's threat detection. It's my ability to run rules or scripts against my data. Digital fingerprinting. I'm going to look for some kind of tendency or something. Maybe I'm going to do a Yara script that looks for. I'm not going to name a particular ransomware. Let's say XYZ. We're being hit with XYZ ransomware. I can go download a Yara script or write a Yara script that will scan my restore points for that potential variant. It doesn't have to be a cybersecurity too. You can be looking for credit card numbers or specific lines of text or social security numbers. Very cool. And we will make sure that malware is not reintroduced in your environment. Something bad happened to my server, your natural instinct is to recover or restore that server. While we're doing that, let's make sure we don't make things worse, right? I have workshops on Yara all the time. Happy to have one with you. I actually use some generative AI to make those Yara scripts, and it's very powerful. Note that when I have my recovery here, I have the ability to abort that recovery, or I can continue the recovery, but isolate, right? Put your systems in a cleaner room, in essence, to make sure there's no additional challenges. So, Yara, again, specific patterns in digital files. It's an important tool, especially if you're, a threat hunter, but we can enhance your capabilities to detect and multiple or mitigate rather threats efficiently, right? I'll give you a quick example of a Yara rule. So here's an example of a Yara rule that I wrote. The metadata is really, just the descriptions. And, that's what I'm referencing. I'm looking up that cybersecurity news up at top. I'm looking for any occurrences of the word lockbit or the string lockbit3 or ransom note or decryptor. Those are 6 strings that I'm going to look for when I'm doing my backups or when I'm doing my recovery. If any of those happen, please tell me. If any of those conditions are met, please tell me. I want to know about it. And that's really all I have today.
Hey, Randy, there's so much to take in here. As individuals listen to this, you made some good points. You have to make sure that your key software as a service applications, Microsoft 365, Salesforce, and many others have complementary backup that can be provided from Veeam, as well as making sure that for your general applications, your cloud-based solutions are also backed up. Can Veeam do some proof of concepts, even if you're not a Veeam customer and people like this approach? What can they do next? Can you say, okay, can I just test this out in Microsoft 365? Can I test it on this application? What are some of the next steps if I'm not a Veeam user right now?
Yeah, so I have customers that are entirely cloud native. Everything I have is in the cloud, and they can do a POC around Veeam or just download our free software and try that. I have different cloud providers within my customer base, AWS, Azure, Google. Any one of those things can be tested. You don't have to be a Veeam customer now. And we'll talk about what makes sense most for your architecture. I've seen people start with on-premise and work to cloud. I've seen people start with cloud and work their way back on-premise.
Well, good. I think, that's a good key takeaway. the common theme here is you can't necessarily just rely upon Amazon to back it up. You can't rely on Salesforce. You can't rely upon Microsoft. It may work, but to provide greater comfort, you really need a third-party solution like Veeam to be bulletproof. And the other side is if anything gets attacked, it also provides, beyond security, greater data resilience, or from another perspective, more application resilience. Anything else you want to add, Randy, before we start and turn it over at AWS?
Happy to help. Reach out to your favorite Veeam partner or your Veeam rep. Happy to get some conversation started with you.